But this is the story that, like, somehow we're so hung up about sex. We're either angry about trafficking or we're getting off on the idea that all these rich people are going to get their comeuppance, or, you know, we keep turning the Epstein story into something other than a scientific espionage story, which is one of its facets.
It's one component.
It's one component.
Right.
Yeah, but it doesn't excite us that this is a guy spying. Control of science, Joe, is not something that is officially a big issue, and it is a massive issue.
It's not publicly a big
That's
issue.
correct, yeah.
And he clearly had
So
a
let's back up.
big interest in
So
science.
why did I buy a ranch in New Mexico in 1993? So that gives you some sense. So I would have funded it in 1990. Los Alamos, which was the high-energy lab up in New Mexico, was losing all its scientists.
In
They were
Los
closing-
Alamos, it was where Oppenheimer and where a lot of the nuclear weapons program, the bomb.
That's where the
original bomb.
Manhattan Project.
Manhattan Project
Yes.
was
Yes, sir.
as Los Alamos, and you bought your property out in New Mexico to be near that?
Yes, because the scientists were going to be, they cut the funding for high-energy physics. But the people who worked in Los Alamos would still be in the Santa Fe area.
They cut that because this was the Cold War dividend, right?
I don't remember exactly why. It was because, again, people thought that physics and high-energy physics really wasn't that important.
Because that was about nuclear weapons.
No, it was because they decided, which may be not right. This was the same time that Murray Gell-Mann came up with the term quark, Q-U-A-R-K. He picked it out of an old poem, the word quark. But it was mysterious. So they were starting to understand in the 90s that our world of the physics world, there was things that were just unexplainable. They called it strange things. You gave it a name. You gave it some characteristics. You called it had charm, was one of the terms. It had a charm. It had a flavor. It had a color. But no one, Mr. Bannon, understood what it was, just like the financial system.
And you wanted to investigate that.
I wanted to see if we could build tools so others smarter than me could help investigate it.
And that was the beginning of your concept of the Santa Fe Institute.
Yes.
And Santa Fe Institute was founded to do study in this type of...
Can these areas of strange things be described by some form of mathematics?
Okay. Now, what you're seeing there is fascinating. Like, just take, by the way, very well isolated, exactly the bit that I wanted. In that interview, or that training, he claims to have founded the Santa Fe Institute. Santa Fe Institute was founded, I think, in 1984, not 1990 or 1993. Bannon clearly knows more about why these scientists were being defunded than does the person who buys this property. Now, that property is not only close to Los Alamos, it's also close to Sandia National Laboratory. What people said to me, Eric, you said he was an idiot. He's clearly very knowledgeable. You can see there that you were wrong. I was like, that is an actor. That is not anyone smart with proximity to Murray Gell-Mann and others. Like, he knew Murray Gell-Mann well. Murray Gell-Mann didn't name quarks in 1990. That goes back to like the 60s when George Zweig called them aces and Gell-Mann called them quarks, for 3 quarks for Muster Mark that came out of James Joyce. So he's just repeating stuff that he doesn't understand. And why did he buy the house, Zoro Ranch? To be close to the scientists whose funding was cut. The people who make weapons and who do high-energy physics, who had the rug pulled out from under them by the United States when they won the Cold War by putting this pressure on the Soviet Union. Like, there's no thing more important than theoretical physicists, you idiots. And you don't fund these people and you don't watch them. Like, the Department of Energy is supposed to have counterintelligence to stop creeps from hanging around the national labs, which is America's secret university system. Hello? He was buying a property to be close to the national labs in New Mexico that make the weapons and that are in charge of trying to figure out the future. So if you think about the national labs as this parallel thing to the university system, but it's the secret part where you have to be American and you have to have a security clearance and all this kind of stuff. Epstein set up a listening post. Now, what's the UFO story? The UFO story is all about nukes. And what was Epstein doing in Cambridge, Massachusetts? The analog of Zoro Ranch is named One Brattle Square. It's right in the heart of Harvard Square. You know, I know it like the back of my hand. It's a 7-minute walk to the Science Center. The Harvard Science Center on floors 3, 4, and 5 is where the math department is. And who was Epstein's initial contact in the math department? It wasn't Martin Nowak, who he funded. It was a different guy named Benedict Gross. Dick Gross was an expert in number theory and in elliptic curves. And elliptic curves are what power the cryptography behind Bitcoin, behind public keys. You're talking about a guy who was setting up listening posts next to extremely sensitive stuff that we've stupidly left unprotected in the open university system or defunded in our national labs.
And when you say listening posts, like, what do you mean? Bug
He's
the
going to
labs?
hold. No.
No? You just remained in contact with
You know
these
what-
people?
Joe, you've got real money. Guys with real money use dinner. Dinner is an incredible thing. I watched Peter Thiel use dinner. Fly people in for dinners. You put people up in a nice hotel for 3 nights. You serve them amazing food from a private chef. You get a black car to collect them, and they'll tell you anything. I don't mean that Peter was doing this in an evil way, but I watched dinner after dinner after dinner as people disgorged all they knew because they were so happy they're getting a $200 bottle of wine and being treated like humans. You know? Like respected. So in part, you have to understand that dinner in and of itself, or a mansion, or a first-class ticket, is all it takes to get people to start talking.
Jeffrey Epstein was CIA. The communications network at Zoro Ranch prove it. The DOJ's own file showed Epstein built a military-grade encrypted link to satellite orbit at Zoro Ranch. The contractor who built it now holds a Pentagon missile defense contract.
So remember,
I didn't know about that.
Jeffrey Epstein is a construct. You know, there's this whole question about, like, why won't Jews talk about Jeffrey Epstein and the sex shit? It's like, as if I haven't been on this since 2004.
Yeah, no one can accuse you of not talking about it. If they can, they're just being ignorant.
No, they're being a bitch because it used to be super dangerous. This was like one of the really costly things is to
So
say.
what do you think that was, though? This satellite encrypted...
All right, let's go there, but I'm a little bit nervous. Why was Jeffrey Epstein able to get all of these people much richer than him into his orbit? That's the question you should be asking. So here's my theory.
Okay.
Just be careful. Okay. What happens when you become a billionaire? I don't know. Not there. Nowhere close. What happens is that you find out that it's not what you thought it was. First of all, you now have staff everywhere. You can't move around easily because you need a security detail. Right? When I first met Peter Thiel, I said, wow, your security detail on this beach is amazing. I can't even tell where they are. He says, am I supposed to have a security detail? I'm like, Peter, you've got to be kidding. Now he's got one. So the first thing is that you find you lose your privacy, you lose your freedom of movement. You've got a retinue of people who have to be constantly maintained. They're under your roof. And you're like, this isn't what I signed up for. I wanted to be rich. You're like, well, you are rich. You can buy things. Well, you can't buy privacy. You can't buy freedom. You can't buy anonymity, all these things that you want. And you can't buy the ability to do fun, naughty stuff. I'm not talking about little kids. I'm saying, like, if you're going to take drugs, you're at risk of, having everybody want to tell the story. If you want to have a menage, you're at the same risk. So the question becomes, what do I do to get what I thought I was going to do, which is the right to have freedom over my own life and to misbehave in fun ways, whatever. Nobody can figure out how to do it. Jeffrey Epstein could do it. Now, why is it that he could do it? Who's spoken to the contractors who built his island? It's the most obvious thing to do. If I was an investigative journalist, that's what I'd do. I'd talk to, like, the plumbers, the maids, all of the people who are just working for a living. Those are the people who constantly leak information about their employers. Well, who's the only person who has the ability to build something? The CIA has its own for has its own construction company. Sovereigns, countries, nations have the ability to do stuff where they know how to keep things under wraps. If you think about S4, I guarantee you there's a men's room at S4. Well, who cleans it? That's a really important question because that's the weak link. And so rich people haven't figured out how to be rich. That's what everybody was attracted to in that upper income bracket.
That he would provide them with experiences.
He would provide them with things that they couldn't figure out how anybody could provide because they were dealing with a state. I assure you that the Sultan of Brunei knows how to do stuff because he's both an individual and a state. Most of us are either in this sort of black ops world or we're dreaming about being very rich or just normal human beings. The very rich are very disappointed. Epstein felt rich, as I said before, in a movie sense. He had freedom. He could say and do things that other people couldn't. He's constantly tripping over the fact that I think he's a wild guy. I'm up for wild guys. I want cowboy billionaires, cowboy physicists, cowboy everything. But in general, we don't want cowboys. And, you know, again, this has nothing to do with little kids. That's a different thing.
Right.
But if you want to go take drugs, take drugs. If you want to have a menage, fine. I don't want to hear about it. I don't spill the tea. I can't stand this culture. Epstein knew how to keep quiet stuff quiet. And why is that? His product, as I've said before, was silence. If you want a really dangerous question, ask the question, what did the people who were in his direct orbit have an unusually high number of disappearances around them?
Did they?
I don't know. But it's a dangerous question. I've never investigated it. But that's, have you ever seen, everybody talks about Eyes Wide Shut now.
Mm-hmm.
You notice that nobody talks about crimes and misdemeanors? Where Woody Allen is directly in his orbit?
I don't even know if I've seen that movie.
There is a scene where Martin Landau and Jerry Orbach's characters are a pair of brothers. I think that they only meet on screen once. And Martin Landau is having an affair, and the woman has decided that she has rights. And Martin Landau is a very wealthy ophthalmologist or something like that. And he has a brother who's a starker. Starker being the Yiddish word for a tough guy. And it's one of the most... Can we find Jerry Orbach, Martin Landau, Crimes and Misdemeanors? It's the most blood-curdling, so well done.
Which, the scene description, though, you didn't really get to it.
Well, they're only in one... If they're only in one scene together, they'll be at a... I haven't seen it in ages, but my memory is that they're at a house walking around a pool, and then they walk inside to the pool house. And there's a resentment that the brother who's in the life is only called to the house occasionally, right? And it's this way in which the genteel and the people who can get things done that you're not allowed to do within the law are connected. And so Woody Allen is clearly writing this from personal experience. He has some interaction between being in high society and knowing Starkers. And I actually knew Woody Allen's old producer is the father of a friend of mine, so a guy named Jack Grossberg. And Jack Grossberg was an epitome of a tough Jew in Hollywood who would deal with the Teamsters or when there was a labor dispute. And, he wasn't in the life, but he was a guy who could stare down a mafioso. I think that in part Woody Allen is writing about what Jeffrey Epstein was providing, which was a measure of silence.
Is this it?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, then I don't know.
No, we're looking for Martin Landau and Jerry Orbach in Crimes and Misdemeanors.
Yeah, well, that's going to be hard to find because it's...
that one.
Right there?
Yep.
Okay.
I think that this is the scene that nobody's talking about.
I don't know, but she's...
So while everybody's watching Kubrick, this is a guy in Epstein's direct orbit. This is what Epstein was. He was a Starker. He was a science spy. He was a Starker. He had buttons.